All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CEO channel. This is John the Bomb. Building others means business. And you know what? There is no other better way. Did I say that better? Other better way, other better way, to really ignite your business, to be able to propel your business. So, Go for CEO community, I am super excited. This gentleman is a co-founder of Ignite Selling. He also is an author now of Sales Improvement Expert. And it's really interesting off camera, just learning a little bit about kind of what he does and what's going on and how they're improving the sales acumen of America, right? And around the world and what they've done for companies. Check out their website. It'll be in the show notes. There'll be some calls to action. So I really want you to pay attention to Steve. I didn't ask you to pronounce your name, so it's Steve. I'll attempt it. Steve Gilda.
There you go. You got it.
Is it? All right. Also, I'm a Paisan. So is the president and co-founder of Ignite Selling Inc., a global sales training, simulation, and consulting organization dedicated to partnering with customers to implement highly customized performance change projects for building world-class sales teams. So, Mr. Steve Gilta, welcome to the Go for CEO channel.
Thank you so much for having me, John. Before we get started, I just want to kind of thank you for not just inviting me, but also putting as your tagline, kind of building others means business. Because let's face it, I mean, anybody to whom is in sales, when they understand the fact that their profits and their revenues are merely an economic outcome of helping other people succeed, I mean, all of a sudden you're finding out that your job is not as difficult as you think. Help others succeed, and building others means business is exactly that. Build others, and you'll find that your company will never starve of revenue. So I really appreciate that building others means business.
Well, it's funny. So we'll segue just a tad. So I came up with that kind of pseudonym, right? My alter ego on a social audio app called Clubhouse. So you're building out your profile and trying to stand out from millions of people on this new app that during the pandemic, and it kind of got really popular, almost like Twitter with its spaces and all that type of stuff. And it was kind of, I was like trying to think of something. And from when I was a younger gentleman, my friends would be, "Hey, John the Bomb, John the Bomb." Like, and I always like acronyms because it makes me remember things that I'm doing, right? Case, copy and steal everything, bomb. And then all of a sudden I came up with building others means business. And that's truly been a passion. So I appreciate it. Actually took months of saying, this is John the Bomb, building others means business, for people to go, wait, hold on a second. Bomb, B-O-M-B, that's what that means. so you caught it right away, my friend. So obviously, we want to have you on our team when we're looking at sales strategies and everything. So, look, our audience is typically looking for some of those nuggets, Steve, that we all talk about. And obviously, you have a co-founder. Couldn't have him on today, but love to get your perspective of how you guys ideated the business. What made you think about Ignite Selling and what was needed in the marketplace? Because all of us as entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs are trying to solve issues, trying to solve problems, right? So, Ignite Selling on that part of it, and then we'd love to get into some of the book, some driving sales pipeline acceleration, coaching topics, and other things that you help sales organizations grow in what they do. So tell us a little bit about that first moment that you're like, Ignite Selling, let's go.
Well, I started my sales career selling copiers for Lanier Worldwide. It was Harris 3M back in the day. I'm dating myself. It was back in the 80s. And I think I was listening to one of yours, you kind of come from that pager industry, that pager marketplace. And back in the 80s and 90s, we were all wearing pagers before cell phones. So I appreciated that a little bit of background on yourself. But I made my way all the way through regional management, vice president, and I finally went to go into this particular space around performance consulting. And I'd always had this passion of wanting to try to find, how do I help a sales team succeed? And that was kind of one of the toughest and most enjoyable parts of my career when I was actually working for Lanier. And that was finding ways to help improve the performance of others. So when I had this opportunity to break into this industry in the mid-1990s, I took this opportunity and went to go work for a gentleman by the name of Neil Rackham. And Neil had written a book called Spin Selling. A lot of people, a lot of your audience members that are probably of my generation anyway, might remember Spin Selling. But I worked directly for Neil for a number of years. We kind of helped grow his business. And then after he sold the business, kind of provided me an opportunity to decide to go off on my own. And so I did. And when I started, I simply said, what is it that I bring to the marketplace that others don't do? And one of the things that we really started looking at was, how do people learn? I mean, sales training has been around since you go back to the Dale Carnegie days, and so many others, Nightingale and all this stuff from the 30s and the 40s. Sales training has been around for a long time. But the unfortunate thing is that the reality is that not much has changed, where we still see companies out there today not using an overhead projector, but maybe using a PowerPoint projector, right? So they're leveraging some technology, but really it's still done the same way, where you sit people in the classroom, you turn on your projector, they have a workbook, you flip through 50, 60 PowerPoint slides in a day, and you're hoping that that's going to change the behavior. Well, one of the things that we decided to do, we started Ignite Selling, we simply said, let's break the mold on that. And so what we simply did is that we recognize that salespeople in general don't learn through PowerPoint. They learn through a peer-to-peer learning experience. And so we started Ignite Selling with that in mind, is that how do we actually bring sales education, sales enablement, performance improvement in a different way? And so what we do is we launch everything through a series of interactive learning maps. These game boards for learning that you see behind my head are merely just little 2 to 4 hour modules that we either do online or we do, when we're together on site. But there isn't any PowerPoint. It's about sharing experiences. It's about a simulated learning experience. And so we thought we would make our attempt at creating a better mousetrap. And we've been very, very blessed that that idea of how do we take something that's been out in the marketplace for decades, and how do you kind of turn it around a little bit and make it more inviting for salespeople to go, you know what? I've got an opinion that I want to share. I've been successful because of these reasons, and I want to share that in the classroom. I don't want to just hear, what do you think I need to stop doing and start doing? I want to share what makes me successful. So we provide that in this kind of peer-to-peer learning environment. And that's kind of how we started Ignite Selling.
I really like that. It's interesting. What came to mind is two different things, right? First, you sought out mentorship as an entrepreneur, right? Because you're inside of a successful company, you help to add value. And then you sought out a blue ocean strategy, which I've talked about a lot in my videos. And there's a great book out there called Blue Ocean. So you created a blue ocean in a red ocean of tons of people doing selling, right? And the Uncle G's of the world, and everybody, right? I won't name their names, but it's interesting, right? That you created a way to really ignite someone's thinking and how to go after it. So tell us about those first few months, and then we'll kind of get into some things, because I think a lot of our community, and I know they really enjoy hearing, what does it really take? You can hear the Mark Cubans of the world and the billions of dollars, right? But my passion was for that small to medium-sized business, typically start up to $1 billion, right? And you're a 7-figure business, right? So, but those first 3, 6, 12 months, can you walk us through maybe one of the first clients you had? Did you go back into your database? Were you approached by someone and asked you to develop this program? How did you go through those flowcharts? So some of that background.
Yeah, I think I love the question, and I'm going to back it up, to John, if I could, just a little bit
Yeah.
about that step of going from a employee in an organization to that entrepreneur. What makes you believe that you have a better mousetrap? What makes you believe that you can be successful as an entrepreneur? And I was really fortunate because I did have a number of mentors, and I wish I can pay credit to the form or the template that I had. But I'm sure if any of your listeners go online and they look up one-page business plan, and I went, and somebody had introduced that to me, and this was back in early 2000, and they said, before you jump to go off on your own, fill out this one-page business plan. Do you have a way to talk about what makes you unique? And so I went through that exercise, and that took some time. That took some time for me to simply say, where is my first customer coming from? I'm leaving tomorrow. I have 0 income coming in. Where is your income coming from? You better have a plan before you leave. And so what that going through that exercise actually helped me do is re-examine, where are my customers coming from? And I've kind of created this kind of idea that I share with other entrepreneurs when they're getting ready to take that first step, is to simply ask them, when you look at your database, you look at your Rolodex, how many A's, B's, and C prospects do you have? And I define an A prospect as a contact inside that organization that has the authority and the budget to act. How many of those people do you have? Because those are the people that know you, trust you, you have credibility with, and they have the access to the budget. How many A's do you have? B's, how many B's do you have? B's would be people that I know somebody in that organization, but they don't have access to the budget, but they can get me an introduction to somebody that I can talk to. That's kind of a B contact. And the C's are maybe somebody which you have industry experience. You have a unique capability in that industry that you can add value to. And now what you need to try to do is kind of introduce yourself to that organization because of the unique value. When I sat back and I looked at my A's, B's, and C's, I had to put the pause on the button originally for about 9 months. I was not ready to leave. My wife would have killed me because we would have had zero income. But because I took the time to start building up that network, I needed a bunch of A's. So I built it up so I had at least 30 contacts that I can go immediately talk to that were people that knew me, trust me, had a relationship with me, and they had access to the budget. That enabled me to leave corporate, to go into an entrepreneurial role, and exceed $1 million in revenue my first year. Now, that only came from planning. I planned before I left, before I went, boom, let's go do it. So I think that's what kind of helped me take that leap and have success right off the bat.
I love it. I mean, I think it's such a purposeful way, right, to attack things. I have a book that's coming out myself, not to shameless plug, but it talks about assessing, right? The first step is to assess, and that's what you did, right? And that one-page business plan. There's a lot of great books out there. In fact, I picked up a new one the other day, and it's interesting, right? Always trying to develop that, and that's what you did with selling. Like, so it's interesting that it's kind of all intertwined, and isn't it always magical when you kind of come to that ideation point and you're like, all right, here's the steps, here's the ABCs, here's what I'm going to do. And now you start to have a real plan. So Go for CEO community, that last 3 or 4 minutes there is gold. And I would repeat it over and over and over to yourself to understand what Steve was talking about when he talked about the ABC and starting your business. So Steve, those first few months, marketing wise, operations, what were some of the investments once you took those 9 months to kind of reconsider your network? And then how did you deploy that initially? And then we'll start talking about some of the tools and the things that you've been able to develop.
Sure. I think that for any entrepreneur that's trying to make a mark in their industry, it comes down to credibility. I mean, people are asking, why you? Why should I engage with John? You know, what makes him different than anybody else that's already out in the marketplace? And so one of the strategies that I deployed right away was credentialing myself through writing and research. And so I had experience in the industry, but nobody knew about it. And so I started looking back at what I knew, grabbing the topics that I was a proclaimed expert at, and simply said, how do I demonstrate my expertise? Went back to some of my clients and said, hey, I'd like to do a little bit of a study here. I'd like to kind of analyze the work that I've done with you in the past, measure the impact that we've had as a result of the partnership that we created. Now, the solution that I brought to the market was not mine, it was my other company. But what I did was not talk about that solution, I talked about the impact that we had as a result of my partnership. So we started kind of writing, and then I started looking for publications. You don't have to go out to an online magazine. You can simply just post those on your website and simply have a blog area, you know, but start posting that things on social media. Start looking at those top 10, 12 topics that your buyers would be interested in. Have them start reading, you know, a 1,500 word, 1,000 word blog on an experience that you had to drive the results of the people that hired you, people that partnered with you. One of the things we started this conversation with was this whole notion that the profits and revenues of your business are merely an economic outcome of helping your clients succeed. So demonstrate, how can I help my clients succeed? Well, you've done it in the past, but you wouldn't be trying to go off on your own to try to do it, you know, as an entrepreneur. So go back and reevaluate that, write about it, publish it, put it on social media, put it into a couple of white papers, share those white papers around, go talk. there are a lot of conferences out there. Who's your audience? Where's your niche? Go speak. Get in front of an audience. You might have to pay for them just to get started. A lot of these conferences will simply say, give me $2,000 or $2,500 and I'll put you up on stage. That's a worthwhile investment. But the answer to your question is, I would say one of the first things that we did that I did that was really smart before I brought my business partner in was credential myself.
I
People
love
ask the question, why should they hire Steve Gilda? Why is he any different or any better than anybody else that's in the marketplace?
it. Mm-hmm.
Don't take my word for it. Take my client's word for it. Take the quotes. Listen to the stories. Listen to the impact that we've had. And so we created just a bunch of case studies.
Yeah, and that's all data, right? Content and data really kind of helps move, convince, influence people to be able to do something with you. So, that I think that leads us really to a nice moment in the interview here of, this next book that you wrote. It's Ignite Your Sales Strategy, right? And you've worked with many really, big names. I saw your website and there's some really cool names. But, if you think about that small to medium-sized business owner, let's take it to that level, and then obviously go upstream as well. But what's your thoughts on Ignite Your Sales Strategy and what this book means to the marketplace and why you developed this piece of content?
I think the early chapters of that book can help any small organization, anybody that is trying to grow revenue. They could be VC backed, private equity backed, or simply just starting off on your own. The early chapters of that book talk about the importance of defining a well-defined pipeline process. If you ask any organization today, regardless of their size, what does it take in order for you to move an opportunity from stage 2 to stage 3 in your sales pipeline? Do you get a consistent answer amongst 5 different people in that organization? If not, you're at risk. Smaller organizations only have a few people. If the 3 to 5 people that you have on your team cannot clearly define what we need to do to move an opportunity from stage 2 to stage 3, you have a bunch of people doing random acts of selling. What you do want to do is create what we call a set of strategic milestones that are built along the early, middle, and late stages of your client engagement process. Strategic milestone is defined as a critical action that, if not taken, puts that opportunity at risk. So you ask any young business, any kind of sales leader, why do opportunities stall? They're going to give you a bunch of reasons. Our research has demonstrated that when you ask that question, any entrepreneur or any sales team within a small business, the answer often blames the customer. They'll say, the customer hasn't done this yet. Customer hasn't provided this for me yet. Customer's budget's still waiting for approval. The customer hasn't been able to get me access to whatever the case might be. Stop for a moment. That's 90%, by the way, 92% of the responses that we had to our survey where the customers blamed us the reasons why the opportunity stalled. Now we simply stop and say, okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. Look at any opportunity in the middle stages of your sales pipeline. Can you answer these simple questions? What are the business metrics your customer's trying to improve in the next 12 months that you can address? If you don't understand the business metrics of the customer that you're engaging with, and you don't know how they measure success, or you ask the question, how successful were they last year in terms of achieving those metrics, and you don't know, that opportunity is not stalling because the customer didn't do something. That opportunity is stalled because you never created enough value up front to demonstrate why they should actually create urgency to partner with you to help them achieve those metrics. So I think one of the very first things that any small business, medium business, or even large business needs to explore, and that is do they have a well-defined pipeline process?
Well, that's a little bit of insight, ladies and gentlemen, into why you need to pick up this book and really start reading. I challenged myself a few years ago. I read one point that CEOs in America read about 60 books a year. And that's kind of the average, right? And I was well below that average. So I challenged myself, and I would always read, a couple books a year, but I really challenged myself. And that year, I actually took it from probably 5, 7 books to 24 books because I did 2 books a month over the next few years, I've had a chance to read, and I've probably stayed consistent at. So I've never gotten to that 60 yet, but Ignite Your Sales Strategy. That this is, it seems to be an incredible book, something that is needed in the marketplace. From an entrepreneur to an entrepreneur status, you have to know how to market and sell your business, right? And the things that Steve just shared in his positioning of the process is so key. So, Steve, I wanted to ask a couple of the questions that we kind of had lined up, and I don't typically do questions, but I love the questions the way that you channeled them here. So the one that comes to mind is coaching your sales pipeline to kind of go into what you just said. So when you say coaching your sales pipeline, what does that actually mean to you, and how should we interpret that?
Yeah, we designed kind of this concept of coaching to the sales pipeline to mean that those frontline sales managers, it's one of the toughest jobs that you can ever have as a sales manager. You're managing salespeople in order to help them drive revenue for your business. So you're indirectly responsible for revenue growth because you're managing it through the people. The unfortunate thing is that too often sales managers take on that role of a super seller. They believe that their job is only to help close business. A smart sales manager knows how to have a conversation with their sales representative about those opportunities that are in their early to middle to late stages and start helping them accelerate that opportunity through the pipeline. So I think that anybody that has a sales leader, if you're listening to this podcast and you are a sales leader, you have to ask yourself, are you asking questions that challenge the critical thinking of your sales representative about that opportunity? So give you a couple examples. We coach salespeople all the time. And I was reading a coaching transcript last week between one of our Ignite coaches and a sales manager. And one of the things that the sales manager asked was, it was an early opportunity, early to middle stage opportunity. Sales manager asked the sales representative, a question that simply says, who are the key influencers involved in this decision-making process? Okay, sounds like it would be a really worthwhile question, but a sales representative would probably, particularly if they've been working the account, knows the answer to that question. Okay, or who are you up against, or when are they making their decision? These types of questions have very little value for a sales rep because they already know the answer. We want to teach sales managers to ask, and by the way, these questions are in the back of every chapter in our book, are questions that we call dissect or develop questions that get that salesperson to start thinking more critically about this opportunity. So instead of just asking who are the influencers involved in this decision, maybe what you want to ask is, of those influencers that you're engaging today, which of those are advocates, and how are you leveraging them to neutralize those people that don't support our ideas? Now that's an idea that's going to challenge the sales representative's thinking. Instead of just asking who's the competitor, maybe we should ask, what is the decision criteria other than price this customer is using to compare us against the competition? If our sales representatives are not challenged, they merely go through this mode of selling. They get into this kind of rhythm of selling. But we need, as sales leaders, need to hit the pause button and say, let me just ask you a question. How does the decision criteria of this customer differ between the top two key influencers? Or what is your strategy to take this high influencer individual and to either move them over so that they start seeing our value, or reduce their level of influence so that they're no longer going to be a detractor towards our idea? What are you going to do, John? And if your sales representatives can't answer that question, those opportunities merely get stalled. They get stuck in the pipeline process, and we wonder, why aren't we selling? So when we talk about coaching to the pipeline process, it's about leveraging a set of questions that sales managers should be asking their sales representatives to ensure that they are being challenged, to ensure that those opportunities are moving constantly through the pipeline process.
Woo! It's a lot of fire there, my friend. A lot of fire. And you actually gave us a 2-for-1. I was actually looking at the list of questions. You went right into knowing the key influencers in the decision isn't enough. So I love that you were able to answer both of those in one swell swoop. When you look at your business, right? and you try to start to show ways or patterns that you're going to be successful, obviously KPIs are a big deal, right? And start to measure those types of things. When you take a look at from a consulting perspective or the way that you approach Ignite selling, what are some things that you do that kind of make it a difference? Because we talked about Blue Ocean at the beginning of the conversation and how you tried to strategize yourself as a difference maker and a different way of doing things. So what are some KPIs that you guys like to look at? And then we'll start going into some of the final questions of the interview here.
Yeah. So the KPIs for our business really come down to the fact are all around the impact that we're making with our clients. So in other words, what we want to be able to do is to assess what kind of growth are we having around our clients' sales goals.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we do but when we engage, and it might be of value for your podcast listeners here, is the fact that we have a process which simply says, okay, we're talking to a vice president of sales, a chief revenue officer, and we want to ask the question, what are the sales goals that you're going to be setting forth for 2024, given towards the end of the year now? So what are the sales goals? Now, they often know those things. They came from Mount Sinai down on a tablet, and they're, or they established them themselves, and now they need to be deployed, okay? So they're saying, we now need to we need to grow sales revenue by 10%. We need to increase margins by 5%. We need to increase market share by 13%. Those are quantitative numbers. So we start our conversation there. And what we want to really do is not just help them meet those numbers. We want to be able to identify and help them execute the sales strategies that are going to help them hit those numbers. So we have a conversation, and this is where we hold ourselves accountable to. We'll ask our customer, what are the 2 or 3 sales strategies that you need to execute in 2024 going to help you achieve those sales numbers? And they'll go, well, what do you mean? And in other words, is it more of what you did last year? In other words, you just have to beat your horses more, or is it about doing something different? And that causes them to pause. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I'll say, well, what's changed in the marketplace? Are there new competitors? Yeah. Does that change? Do you have to change what you did last year in order to compensate for those new competitors in the marketplace? Are you launching a new product? Yeah, we are. Okay. Do you have to do something different in order to get that new product into the hands of a different buyer? Yeah, maybe. So we help them establish new sales strategies. And then we build quantitative metrics around those strategies. And our job, our KPI for each client is to ensure that those things are executed. Because we know that if those strategies are executed, they're going to meet or exceed those sales goals. So we hold ourselves accountable by meeting with our clients every 90 days. It simply says, how are we doing? You said that you wanted your sales organization to be meeting with every IT manager for any company that's spending more than $3 million of this competitive product. So the strategy is for your team to go meet with the IT directors in every company in their territory that's currently spending more than $3 million on this competitor. How you doing? We haven't started that yet. Let's talk about that. Okay, your sales strategy was, in order for you to hit that sales revenue number, one of the strategies is to ensure that your team goes meet with the director of IT in every company that's spending more than $3 million a year with this competitor. Why haven't you done that? We haven't identified them yet. How hard is it to identify where those customers are? Let's get started. And so our job is to help our clients succeed by holding them accountable to the things that they said they need to do to help those sales goals. Does that help?
I love it. It's very interesting as you're going through this process and really sharing kind of the intricate side of how you get your KPIs to then influence your clients, metrics to grow. It's so relevant when you think about, how you position that, right? And the sell is really to the leadership. It sounds like you work strongly with C-suite or leadership of the company to influence then the doers. And the doers are influenced by better questions that these managers are asking so that they think, right? And I love it. I mean, I think, it's interesting as a high performer, I've been pretty much all my life. I am more challenged when I'm an entrepreneur and working inside of a company by a manager that's, yes, 100% actually challenging me to move my mindset, right? I had a deal right now just a couple hours ago. I'm in acquisition finance, and this particular deal, we had to think of 3 or 4 options for this not to just implode, and the whole, it's a $3 million loan, so it's a nice size loan, to implode. And it's interesting, because of some of the things that we did pre this conversation at 8 in the morning today. Last night, it was those types of things that made me think, all right, well, here's another way, here's another way. What way can we position this so that there's a positive outcome for everybody, right? Not just for us to win, but for everybody to win. So really, really cool stuff. So, typically in the Go for CEO community, we end our interviews with CEO. So it's client experience, engagement, meaning who do your vendors engage with? How do your vendors engage with you? How do your employees? How do you and your partner engage? So engagement is such a integral part. Some people call it culture and all those types of things in their workplace. And then the last one is operational excellence, because ultimately, hey, let's be honest. I could get a sale through the door, but if you're not flowing it right through to the end and delivering on that service or product, then it could definitely be a stall as well, right? So from a high level, Steve, client experience, what would you say people are getting when they think about doing business with Ignite Selling, picking up your book? What would be that client experience?
Client experience is around an enablement solution to where we are transforming the selling behaviors and coaching behaviors of their team. So that client experience starts off with that conversation around what are you trying to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months economically? Give me the metrics, market share, revenue, margins. And then we have that conversation around what do the sales strategies need to look like? And then we get down to, well, what do the sales team and your managers need to be doing different in order to execute those strategies? So the experience is a customized learning experience where we would actually come in virtually or in person, where we would take some of these learning maps that just get about my head, pull your team together around these learning maps, and challenge them to think about the application of how do you better manage the key influencers involved in the decision. You already know who they are. Question is A, are they right? And B, what are you doing to influence those people in your favor? But it's not just around influencers. It can be around, your pipeline process. It can be around quantifying value. It can be around targeting the right prospect. How often do we have bad business in our pipeline? And so Ignite Selling has several little 2-hour modules that we will pick and choose to help our clients better exceed the outcomes they're looking for. So the client experience is kind of a gamified simulation learning experience for their managers and their sales reps. That's the client experience.
That's phenomenal, phenomenal. So, the next level is engagement, right? So when you think about, Steve, you and your partner, we didn't discuss too much about that dynamic, but that engagement, your vendors' engagement, who you work with that actually sell you stuff, right? To tools that you get, sold to. What's engagement look like in your world?
Engagement for us, again, because we recognize that the profits and revenues of our business are an economic outcome of helping our clients succeed.
Hmm.
Our engagement is all about helping our clients succeed. So therefore, after that event, that learning event, the engagement kind of continues to where we have online learning. We're measuring the application of that learning. And then we have these 90-day meetings with the senior level folks. Somebody says, so how are we doing? Because there are companies that are 10 times, 20 times larger in revenue than we are. We don't have the marketing budget to compete. But there's something that I learned a long time ago, and that's evidence defeats doubt. And so we can demonstrate the evidence, the impact that we're having with our clients quarter after quarter after quarter, they're going to continue to want to come back for us. Our client engagement is never ending. We are constantly working with our clients to find ways to tweak and to modify and to improve the outcomes that they're trying to reach. So we always look at, do we have the evidence to demonstrate the impact that we have with our clients? So our client engagement is kind of an ongoing engagement.
Awesome, awesome. So the last one is operational excellence. I know we didn't touch too much on that, of some of the tools, the systems that you're using, right? The softwares that you're using, those types of things. But what helps Ignite Selling just kind of stay very streamlined in your process of operations. What would you say is the high level on that?
I think it comes from two things. One, the people, and two, the system. Is that one of the things that we recognized early on is that when we set up our business, we kind of put a dividing line where my business partner and I kind of operate. I manage what we call demand capture, kind of demand generation, and that's all sales and marketing. So my responsibility for the business is to help drive sales and marketing so revenue comes into the organization. Once the contract is captured, it then goes to what we call demand fulfillment. That demand fulfillment has a whole separate team of customer success, designers, facilitators, and project managers. And so those are the people that help us make sure that we find a prospect, contract with that prospect to make it a client, and then develop it in a way that we continue the ongoing engagement. So it starts with making sure we have the right people in the place, all clearly defined about what their roles are. In addition to people, I mentioned that we have systems. And the systems that we use are pretty simple systems. We're a small business. So we have a CRM system that we're using called Pipedrive. Okay. We use something called Active Campaign, which is a marketing software that enables us to ensure that our customers and our clients are always staying connected to us through, we're going to be doing a newsletter coming up here, adding that to the Active Campaign. But Active Campaign and Pipedrive are the systems that we use on the front end of the business for demand generation. On the back end of the business, we're using QuickBooks for all the management, like a lot of small businesses probably are. But we also use Asana, and we use the Google Drive. And so we share in our Google Drives. We share project timelines, updates, all of that kind of stuff. And in the Google Drives are all of the different files for the client and all those things. But Asana is our project management software that we use. And we probably need to be using that a little bit better on the back end so that things don't, that our facilitators that are out in the field are aware of what's happening coming up on their calendar, say in March. But they're not surprised, oh, I didn't know I had something to do with March. So, but we probably need to use Asana a little bit better. But those are the systems that we're using on the back
And I appreciate that vulnerability you just shared, right? A lot of times, we don't see the forest from the trees as business owners that are actively in the business, right? When you're working on the business, when you're working in the business, it's two different strategies, two different lenses that we're using. And what you just said is pretty awesome because I think most of us can relate, right? When you say, hey, when I'm having an interview, I'm actually sharing, and I'm also thinking, oh, wait, these are some of the areas that I can also improve, right? And so that's pretty awesome that you share that as well. So Steve, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way to connect with you? Where can they get the book? I think you shared an offer that you have right before we started the interview that you may have a signing of a book or something. Can you share all those details on how people can engage with you?
Sure. They obviously can connect with myself or the company on LinkedIn. Steve Gilda, Gielda. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you. Or just go to Ignite Selling on the LinkedIn page, and you can find us there as well. But in the show notes, as we talked about, John, one of the things we'll do is anybody that reaches out to sales@igniteselling.com, just put that in an email, sales@igniteselling.com, and reference this particular podcast. We'll go ahead and we'll send them a free signed copy of our book. And they can awesome. Benefit from understanding how do you develop that pipeline process to there's probably well over 60 strategic coaching questions in the book that you can be asking yourself, or you can be leveraging that your team to ensure that opportunities don't stall in the pipeline process. But happy to give that book away to anybody that references this particular podcast.
Well, we super appreciate it. The Go for CEO community, I believe, we are growing little by little, step by step, and going to be able to be a big influence in the marketplace, not only in podcasting, but some offline things that we're doing. I'm actually launching a book soon, so maybe I'll get on your podcast, right? So that type of thing. So, but love the collaboration, Steve. Thank you so much for being a part of the Go for CEO channel. And hey, by the way, subscribe to the channel. I always forget this, but a humble brag. I think that we are one of the best channels for small to medium-sized business owners to really be impacted from owners like Steve. someone who took an idea, who was inside a business as an entrepreneur, became an entrepreneur, took 9 months to do that because he didn't want to jump, just willy-nilly, and now also brought on a partner that complements his competency of where he feels most comfortable and really ignites and excels, right? No pun intended. So Ignite Selling, take the book, Ignite Your Sales Strategy, pick it up, and thank you so much for being on the Go for CEO channel. Take care, Steve.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.